Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled People Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Karen demands Christmas dessert samples. After that, am I the jerk for telling my dad that I'll gladly spend Christmas with him if he gives me back my college fund as a Christmas gift? And after that, stepdad is demanding I help my stepsister buy a house. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen does not get to drink any eggnog. I know I'm probably the only one, but I never actually liked eggnog. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Karen demands Christmas dessert samples. Context: for every holiday, my mother would ask the women in the family, my sisters, sister-in-law, my wife, my female cousins, to send samples of the desserts they planned to bring to the celebration for testing and to see if these desserts could make it to the food menu. My wife has been complaining about my mother deliberately rejecting every dessert sample she sent. So many times, my mother has told her that she's being honest and keeping the guests' best interests at heart. Yet, my wife still thought that my mother was deliberately excluding her since 2 of her dessert samples were rejected before. For this year's Christmas, my mother is doing the same thing, but this time, she told every woman who's participating to make a cookie sample and send it to her for testing. My wife took it as a challenge, and to be honest, she worked really hard to make a good sample and sent it to my mother days ago, and the results just came in yesterday. I came home from work and found my wife upset. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me that my mother rejected the sample she sent and decided to exclude her from baking from the menu list and the menu for Christmas this year. I didn't know what to say, but then she told me that she was backing out of the invitation to attend Christmas with my family. I was stunned when I heard her make this statement. I tried to talk to her, but she said it was done. I called her unreasonable to decide to bail on the whole family over some cookie sample. That's just crazy and quite unreasonable. We had a full-on argument about it, and she stated that my mother caused this, but I told her that my mother is pretty serious and careful about the food she offers to the guests, since we are going to have relatives coming from all sides of the country. She told me to stop mentioning it. Later, I heard her cry, despite telling her that her baking is amazing and people have preferences, that's all. Am I the jerk for insisting that her decision was unreasonable? Info: if you're asking whose cookie sample made it to the menu, the answer is my sister and my 2 cousins. Info: a few things to put on here. 1. My wife wasn't the only one whose sample was rejected. We have sister-in-laws, my brother's wife, and my younger sisters. My mother did not force anyone to participate. It was up to whoever wanted to take part. 3. This is just about the dessert, since my mother tends to be very careful in this category. But for other types of foods, dishes, appetizers, salads, stuff like that, it's all welcome, as she stated. Update: great, so I just got off the phone with my brother, and he told me that his wife is doing the same thing as my wife, and that she has decided to back out of the invitation to spend Christmas with family as well. Turns out my wife must have told her about her decision, and she decided to follow her lead. My brother is upset, saying my wife is encouraging his wife to do this. I see that the problem has just gotten bigger now. Who knows, my younger sister might join in and decide not to go as well. I don't know how this got out of control so quickly. I guess we'll try to have a discussion with my mother about this and see how it goes. So correct me if I'm wrong, but for years and years, your mother has demanded that all the women, why not the men too, in your family send in samples. For years and years, your wife has tried her hardest to appease your mother, had pushed herself to the limit, and has been left completely and utterly demoralized each and every time by a humiliating tradition enforced by the holiday tyrant. And even worse, her shame was publicly put on display each and every year, as other family members would no doubt notice that, once again, her food was not chosen. Finally, after producing something she was unbelievably proud of, she was once again left embarrassed and most likely deeply hurt, as she was deemed not good enough for yet another year. This is the straw that broke the camel's back, and she decides she's had enough of her humiliation and that she will not give her cruel mother-in-law the satisfaction of seeing her discomfort on such a big day. She makes a boundary that many would have made a long time prior, and her husband tells her she's unreasonable for setting up boundaries? Dude, come on. You know you're the jerk. You're the jerk. I'd never in a million years bake samples to be approved. I'm showing up with my food. Eat it or not, I really don't care. Your mom is the jerk and very, very weird. You're the jerk. Your mom is also a jerk who takes samples in and makes others feel bad because of their cooking. This tradition sucks, and I get why OP's wife doesn't want to go. Not the jerk. Did y'all read it all? Yes, she asks all the women, but it's always a yes or no thing. You either want to or you don't. Simple. This only happens in the dessert category, and you can bring whatever for any other category. She doesn't care. This idea is good because it saves the wife from even greater humiliation when she says it's good, but it's not, and she brings it to the function and no one eats it. If her food isn't good, why should everyone be forced to eat it? She can literally bring something else that isn't dessert. The mother is being honest and not biased because obviously other people were not chosen. Like, I've been to so many functions, and there's always that one plate of utter rubbish, and my mother would tell us to always try it so the owner of the plate doesn't feel bad. Not the jerk. And your wife should stop sending samples. Your wife is married to you, not your mom, and you cannot get mad if she stops sending samples either, because it's clearly a waste of time since it's likely going to be like the same 2 to 4 family members. Keep it real, you know this. I understand the pride because she wants to feel included, but it's been 3 times and it's a blow mentally. Definitely get your wife an extravagant gift for Christmas and let it be known it's for all the delicious cookies she's giving you all year long. Cookies like love, care, passion, etc. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP and his mom or his wife? Please let us know. Just let people bring what they want. His mom's really overcomplicating this. Am I the jerk for telling my dad that I'll gladly spend Christmas with him if he gives me back my college fund as a Christmas gift? To make this brief, I, male 32, had issues with my dad after my mom passed and my stepmom came along. I hated a lot of decisions that were made, but what has left a long-lasting impact was taking my college fund to pay for my stepbrother's surgeries. Unfortunately, he's passed on. He passed last year at the age of 16 from a chronic heart problem. I keep my distance, but still see my grandparents and uncles and aunts, cousins, etc. With the holiday season coming up, Dad started talking to me through some relatives, close relatives. He went on about his overwhelming feelings of loneliness, his upcoming divorce, and invited me to spend Christmas with him because he's alone and heartbroken. As a response, I told him I'll gladly spend Christmas with him if he gives back my college fund in a form of a Christmas gift. He and the others didn't like my response. He thought this was harsh, and my relatives said that I was a judgmental, petty, greedy jerk to say this to him after he's lost so much. They said he did all he could to save his stepson, my stepbrother, which they described as noble and that he doesn't owe me a thing. I went home after a big argument with my uncle who came at me for what I said. Now I feel like crap. Maybe I should have just calmly, politely declined the invitation and not said this to him and made him feel guilty for how he handled my stepbrother's situation. Edit. I just took a look and I see that I'm getting a ton of comments here. To answer a few questions. 1. The fund was made by my dad. Mom was a stay-at-home mom and didn't work, but they both agreed that this fund would go towards my education. 2. I was able to get in college. I started working to pay my way and had some relatives help, but my uncle did so much for me, which is why I said I felt bad when he berated me. He holds a special place in my life, and he's the last person I want to disappoint or let down. Edit 2. Okay, for those who are saying the fund wasn't mine, whose fund was it then? I really don't get this. Maybe you can expand on how exactly the fund wasn't mine and to whom it belonged. Also, for those that think I'm being cruel to my dad after he lost so much, I try not to go out of my way to be mean or malicious. Matter of fact, I want little to nothing to do with him, but all this time, I've been playing nice to please my uncle and relatives, but that's it. Info. Where did the money in the college fund come from? Was any of it from your late mother? Because if it was 100% of your dad's money, that's very different than if he spent money your late mother set aside for her own kid's education on his new stepkid. Regardless, I think the problem is that your dad didn't prioritize you until he was lonely and now he wants your company. The college fund is a symptom of that, and it's not fair for dad to brush it under the rug. Edit, because people are misunderstanding. I'm not saying a stay-at-home mom doesn't contribute. Knowing this information, I believe that half of whatever was saved during OP's mother's lifetime was her contribution and should not have been spent by his dad. What I meant to get at with my question was to see if it was money that dad had saved up after mom's passing, for example. This is such a difficult situation. I do feel for OP, but I also understand dad's position, and I'd hope that OP eventually finds it in his heart to forgive dad. But honestly, if this is happening in the USA, then this country's horrendous healthcare and higher education systems are 100% at fault. They leave folks with debt and bankruptcy, and often with impossible choices to make. I'm so sorry for OP and his dad. No jerks here. Yeah, I can't get on board with OP's line of thinking about the college fund. Was his father supposed to let his stepson pass so OP can go to college and be debt-free? Not even a close choice for OP's father, in my opinion. I'm hoping OP is just young, and one day he'll see how difficult the situation was. Not the jerk. I don't understand these "you're the jerk" comments. There was a college fund in place, and it was used for someone other than you. Definitely not the jerk. Dad used the college fund to try to save someone's life. That's not a jerk move, it's a desperate father move. Like someone else said in another comment, Dad prioritized issues, not the kids. And he was the one that set up the fund. He did not use any inheritance left by OP's mom. Sorry, OP, but you're the jerk. I'm going to get hate for saying this. I'm shocked at how many people will say people don't have to split or give a college fund to a step-sibling, but will tell you that you're the jerk for being upset. Your step-sibling had 2 parents, you had 1. That parent took from your figure and prioritized his wife's kid and hung you out to dry. Would it have been nice to give them the money to save your step-sibling? Maybe, but that's not the question. Your parents or dad set aside money for you, and then your dad and stepmom used it on someone else. Your dad is a complete jerk to prioritize another kid over his own. Once it's set aside for your education, it's no longer his money to take back and definitely wasn't your stepmom's to use. Your dad's bad decisions are coming back to bite him. Now he's lonely because of his decisions, and I don't blame you for telling your dad exactly what he needs to do now to have you back in his life. Not the jerk. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his dad? Please let us know. I think what parents should do is not tell their kids about the college fund until it's time to spend it. That way, if an emergency comes up and they have to use part of it, their kid won't get mad at them. Stepdad is demanding I help my stepsister buy a house. I'm 29, female. When I was about 10, my mom married my stepfather. I have an older brother, Luke, who was 15. My stepfather had Amy and Ada, who were 12 and 11. We didn't come from a privileged background. My mom was a minimum wage worker and my dad was absent. Our stepfather had a very good income. Their deal was that they wouldn't combine finances and they would each contribute equally to the household, and then each takes care of their kids with their spare money. So my mom never had anything for us, and my stepfather was spending big on his kids. This included holidays, which Luke and I were excluded from. Stepfather would pay for mom, but not for us. Luke and I also shared a room, even though Amy and Ada had their own rooms, and we had a guest room. Because stepfather insisted that he was paying more towards the house, so my mom's share would only get her one room for the kids. Luke and I were constantly teased for this situation by the 3 of them as we grew up. My mom always said that we should be thankful because if it wasn't for our stepfather, we would not be living in a nice home in a good neighborhood. Anyway, Luke and I became determined to be able to take care of ourselves so that we wouldn't need to take nonsense from anyone. We've both done quite well with our careers and finances, and we are in very good shape. Since turning 18 and moving out, my relationship with the 3 of them has been very limited. I wouldn't call us friends, but we can exist peacefully if we are in the same place. I visited my mom recently, and my stepfather mentioned that Amy wants to buy a house now that she's pregnant. He asked me if I'm able to help out a little with the deposit. The house is £500,000, and she needs at least £150,000 deposit. She has $100,000 so far, $25,000 on her own, $25,000 from her mom, and $50,000 from her stepfather. He was asking if Luke and I can help cover the extra $50,000, and he said he'd pay us back as part of the inheritance eventually. I said no. He insisted that Luke and I both own our houses outright and with our incomes, so we should be able to help. I said whether I can or not is irrelevant. My answer is no. He reminded me that Luke and I each gave £10,000 to our cousin for buying a house as a gift. Amy is my sister, and he's offering to pay us back. I said that was our choice then. This is my choice now. He insisted that we should be willing to help out our family if we're able to. I replied back, like how you helped me and Luke when we were kids? Everyone just went quiet when I said this. After a while, he said if we went back in time, he'd have done things differently, treated all 4 of us equally. I said that's good of you, but doesn't make you entitled to my money now. He said he knows he's not entitled, That's why he's asking and promising to pay it back. I said the answer is still no, not entitled to a loan either. My mom later told me I could have turned him down without being a jerk or bringing up childhood, which he already feels guilty about. Am I the jerk? Absolutely not the jerk. And I think you did turn him down without bringing up your childhood, but he kept pressuring you, so it's totally understandable that you told the truth. OP. Exactly. I only brought up our childhood after he tried to guilt me about how we're family and should help each other. Initially, it was just a simple rejection. I don't think he feels guilty. He only regrets treating you guys badly now that you and Luke have turned out successful. He's guilty he got called out on being a penny pincher about what kids deserve. Not that he actually did it to them. He's upset that he's facing consequences for his behavior, not that he is ashamed he did it. Not the jerk. He needed to hear it. If he brings it up again, tell him he's welcome to use all the money he saved excluding you and your brother from the family on his daughter's house. He's an entitled jerk, and honestly, your mom is a jerk too for allowing her own kids to be subjected to that unfairness. For what it's worth, my dad remarried when I was 11, and my stepsister is a year older. My dad and stepmom, even though my dad made much more money, ensured that the two of us girls got everything the other did, almost to the point of comedy. If my stepsister wanted a shirt, my stepmom would grab one for me in a different color to make sure things were fair. That was probably over the top, but I admire them for making our home feel like we both belong there equally. When companies start tracking your productivity, beat the system. My company decided to implement third-party software to track employee productivity, and they started this BS way before lockdown and remote work. All technology teams were being monitored, and I worked on a product team under technology. The main metric they used was how much new code was being written, which is silly because even programmers don't write new code very often. Updated code didn't count, and those were most of the tickets I managed, and meanwhile, I was always fixing other people's code, and I was the go-to person for any escalations and releases. When this first started, I saw a dozen emails about writing more code, and I thought it was a joke until I got an unscheduled meeting with the department head. He scolded me for having written zero code that month, and despite pushing that my role doesn't exactly require me to write new code, he said, "Sorry, this is the new world." Exact words. Fine. I found some old code libraries that no one used anymore but were still active. Every month, I would copy the libraries, delete them, and then replace them. I tested it out, and that counted as new code. Before all this, I was a top performer up for promotion, but my reviews from before didn't count anymore, and all that mattered were these metrics. I tried to keep my shenanigans under the radar, but one month, I did the delete and replace move twice because I forgot if I did my monthly coding quota, and did it again just in case. Well, that quarter I won an award for Most Prolific Engineer, and it came with $2,000. That got the attention of my manager, who was luckily a cool guy and openly complained about how stupid the productivity tracking software was. He knew I wasn't writing code, and neither was he, so I finally told him my secret. He actually thought it was hilarious, and he himself had been just deleting and replacing lines of code to bypass the quota, but he didn't think about doing entire libraries. I knew I wouldn't get in trouble with him, and he even nominated me for a recognition award, which came with another $1,000 in gift cards. I did eventually get promoted, over 6 months later than initially discussed, but things got even worse with the company monitoring productivity during the lockdown. It was so bad to the point where they were logging how many times you were away from your computer for more than 5 minutes. People actually got fired for taking too many breaks between 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Let's just say I was taking my laptop everywhere out of paranoia. It didn't increase productivity, but it for sure hurt my morale. Thankfully, I got the heck out of there. The rest of my team was not so lucky, but I still get texts from my old manager and team about how they're using my shenanigans. Ultimately, I got a nice $3,000 in awards, $15,000 from the promotion, and a lifetime of drinks from my team for beating the system. Am I the jerk for letting my father go hungry for more than a day? Growing up, I was forced to do all the chores while my two brothers weren't. I didn't come to no contact with my parents because it's necessary not to cut contact with them. I'm the only one who lives in the same city. The others live too far away. On Saturday, last week, my parents called me saying that there was a problem with the electrical part in their house, and they begged me to let them stay at my house for 4 days, as they would be spending a lot of money to fix it and they couldn't afford to stay at the hotel. I agreed, but said that I had my routine and would not be helping my father. They agreed. On the first day, it was pretty okay, and my mom did everything for my dad. The next day, my mom had to make an emergency trip to her sister. Her sister paid for her to go, and she lives in another city, in the morning. I went to work and had lunch at the company. When I got home, my father said, "Wow, I thought you would never come home. Can you make something for me? I just ate what your mother made for lunch in the morning." Keep in mind that my fridge was full and my father knows how to cook, in addition to knowing how to use the cell phone and internet. He just didn't want to do it because my mother does everything. Me. "Look, Dad, I'm really tired. Besides, I'm leaving here in an hour." It was 6 p.m. He started to complain, saying that he would get hungry, that I should make him food for lunch and dinner, blah blah blah. I just replied, "You have hands, you have a telephone. There's a pizzeria contact on the fridge if you don't want to make food, but I won't make it." The night was good and I only returned at 1 a.m. My father was already sleeping and Mom didn't come back. I woke up late, so I just ran to work without even saying hello to him, so I didn't pay attention to anything. As the day before, I ate at work. When it was about 4 p.m., my mother called me screaming, saying that my father was dizzy with hunger because I refused to make him anything and I knew he doesn't do those things, so it wouldn't cost me anything to make him even a basic snack, but I preferred to let him starve. I pointed out what I said before they came, and she started saying that this was negligence with an elderly person who is capable of doing everything. They left before I got home and stayed at a random person's house. My brothers are complaining, accusing me of being petty and vindictive, just like my parents. I don't think I'm wrong, but I would like outside perspective. Am I the jerk? My father is 63 and my mother is 60. Not the jerk. Your father is a grown man. He could make something himself, but he chose to get into a power struggle with you in your own home while they're staying with you. Good for you for standing up for yourself. Yeah, and if your brothers won't back off, I would tell them they're either perfectly capable of moving back home, moving in with your parents, or moving your parents out to them to take care of them properly, or they're capable of shutting up and letting you deal with your dad's petty tantrums as you see it. I think your dad may be famous. I think I saw his picture under the definition of weaponized incompetence. Not the jerk. Sorry about your family dynamics. You were clear when they asked to stay with you. If they chose to ignore it, that's on them. Not the jerk. Starving with a fridge full of food? Really? Wow. You could have at least made him snacks? Are you kidding me? What is he, a 5-year-old? Sounds like your father is being a petulant child and trying to make some absolutely ridiculous point about superiority by refusing to help himself. Good for you for standing up to them and calling out their BS. Just wow. Am I the jerk for telling a social group member that the free social activities were not free for me? I'm the organizer of a social meetup group. We have lots of activities to do on a regular basis that we all enjoy. Usually it's going out to eat, but also fun things like movies, bowling, farmers market, potlucks at various members' houses if they're able to host, grilling at the park. I have one member who asked me if I could please schedule activities for the group that are free because she's poor and can't afford activities that cost money. Fine, we can come up with some free or at least very low-cost activities to do, but I also have to consider the rest of the group and what they want. I don't mind the first several times she reminded me to remember to schedule free activities for those of us on a budget, but then I started to get mad. Especially after I organized 3 activities that were free: the visit to the farmer's market, the visit to the nature center, and a bike ride around the college campus, specifically so that she could participate and she didn't even show up. She said that the farmer's market was not free. It sure can be if you don't buy anything. I didn't buy anything. I walked around and looked at stuff. And the bike ride was because we also planned to go out for pizza afterwards. She could have come bike riding with us and then skipped out on the pizza if she didn't want to spend money. Nobody else would have shown up if we were just going to ride bikes and not going somewhere to refresh afterwards. Did she expect us to sit around in the heat and look at each other? She wanted me to schedule potlucks, which are fine if people are willing to host, but potlucks are not free. She was getting on my nerves with her constant reminders to remember to reschedule free things because she's poor and can't participate unless it's free. So one day, while she was telling me for the 50 millionth time, I told her that this activity we were doing cost me about $100. It was a picnic in the park we were having. I brought the ice chest and portable grill so we could have this fun activity, which was fun, but it was not free. So apparently her feelings were hurt because I told her what this activity cost me to set up. And I didn't mind buying the portable grill and ice chest. I chose to do that. She thought it was inappropriate for me to tell her what I spent for supplies so that she could enjoy her free, but not for me, activity. So, am I the jerk? First for scheduling activities that could have been free for her, but she didn't show up because it wasn't completely free, and for telling her what this so-called free activity had actually cost me to set up. Not the jerk. Make her an organizer and let her run the free activities, seeing as she doesn't seem to think yours are free enough for her. OP. I always reiterated that any member can set up and organize an event if they want to, like hiking for example. Some people wanted to go hiking, but I'm not a hiker, and I had no clue where the good hikes were. But people who are into hiking were free to suggest a place and then set up a day and time. No one ever did. If you want a hike organized, I'm not your person for that. I would just stick to that as your mantra from now on. We always like to have a variety of events. I'm happy that you want to set up some free ones. I can't wait to see what you plan. And be super friendly and cheerful about it. Not the jerk. Not the jerk. Let me translate her request for you. I want a handout, someone to pay for me to have an enjoyable outing. Just block her out of the group and move on. People like that are toxic. Everyone sucks here. She's wrong for not showing up for the things that are in her budget. You're wrong for reminding her that she's a charity case that others are sacrificing money for. Nobody who's poor wants it bitterly thrown in their face that people resent doing things decent for them. Also, the have-nots waving bye to the haves halfway through an outing when they depart for more costly pleasures is pretty awkward and depressing. I'd have probably skipped that bike ride too. You're the jerk. You didn't schedule a single thing that's free. You always had a caveat to buying something. She's not asking for charity. She's asking for actual free activities. All the not the jerks sound unempathetic. OP. Then feel free to start your own social group where you schedule nothing but absolutely free activities that cost no one anything. Which, like I keep saying, would amount to sitting in a public park with no food or drink except water and looking at each other. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or the other group member? Please let us know.
Sometimes I think socializing is a lot more trouble than it's worth. Know what I mean, Reddit boy?
Why don't you ask someone who works here? The time I was a jerk. This is an old story from about 20 or so years ago. I stopped at Costco on the way home from work. I just came in looking for some electronics or whatnot, and so wasn't pushing a cart. And while in the electronics section, this older woman sees me looking over some item, and I can see she's interested in an item shelved near the one I'm looking at. I don't even remember what the items were. Anyway, she turns and asks me some very specific questions about the item she's looking at. I looked up at her and simply answered, "Sorry, I have no idea." A few minutes later, at the other end of the same aisle, this same lady comes up to me with some other item in her hands and asks me, "Do you know blah 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 about this?" Again, it was an item that I had no idea about. And at this point, I'm mildly annoyed and just answered, "Nope," and turned to go browse the next aisle over. It's worthwhile, I think, at this point in the story to explain that I was working in northern New Jersey, basically a suburb of New York City, in a fairly stressful job, and one of the reasons I had even stopped at Costco was that my 12-mile ride home was mired in terrible traffic. Rather than spend the next 30 minutes trying to go the last 6 miles home, I pulled into the Costco I was about to crawl past, figuring I'd do a little shopping and let some of the traffic clear out while I did so. So I started this whole experience wound a little tightly. On top of that, this was when I was in my early 30s or late 20s. I was a pretty big jerk back then. I have mellowed since, and partly due to this experience. Anyway, moving on. 5 minutes later, I'm nerding out over whatever thing I was looking at in the next aisle, and the woman comes around the corner from the other aisle where I'd left her, specifically walking past other customers to come to ask me a third question about something that I had no idea about. By now, I'm pretty annoyed. It's clear to me that she's not flirting with me or anything like that, and I cannot understand why she keeps coming to bug me about these things when all I want to do is just waste a few minutes out of traffic. In all honesty, if I'd had any answers for her, I would likely have given them to her, but I didn't have those answers. In reply to her question, I gave her a crappy look, and in a very condescending voice I said, "I have no idea, but maybe you ought to ask someone who works here," and made an overly dramatic gesture with my hands pointing towards one of the employees rounding the corner at the edge of the electronics section about 20 feet away. The woman looked at me, somewhat offended, and didn't say another word. I didn't give a darn. Why couldn't this lady leave me to my nerding out? I left the electronics section and wandered off, and after another 20 or so minutes of walking around and just avoiding traffic, picked up some grocery item or other and walked to the cashier line to pay for it. As my turn came up to pay, I pulled out my wallet looking for my membership card and could not find it. I knew I had to show it to get into the store and quickly checked all my pant pockets. No card. The cashier smiles at me and points to my chest. I looked where she was pointing, and in a split second I realized, maybe not for the first time ever, that I was a giant jerk. So my employer had access control on all buildings, and you scanned your employee ID at the door of any of these buildings to enter. Employees were also obliged to display their IDs at all times while on work property. Many people wore the badge attached to one of those retractable cards that you clip to your belt. Some wore their badge on a loop of ribbon around their neck, and others, like myself, wore their badge in a transparent pouch that was designed to clip onto a shirt or jacket pocket. My employer also required business attire, so on my way home from work, I was dressed in leather-soled shoes, pleated dress pants, a white button-down shirt, and a tie. Left the jacket in the car for the trip to Costco. Apparently, I also left my work ID badge holder still clipped to my shirt pocket. At that point in time, it would not have been unusual for me to go in and out of buildings at work a dozen or more times on any given day. After a year or so, it had become a well-practiced and unthinking motion for me to grab my work ID from the badge holder that held it on my shirt pocket, flash it to the door sensor, and just slip it back into the pocket on the holder as I entered a building. Apparently, when I pulled my Costco ID out of my wallet to get into the store, I unthinkingly placed it in the badge holder, since I'd forgotten to take that off and leave it in my car with my jacket, instead of back into my wallet. I had been walking around the store looking like a manager, with a badge displaying the Costco logo prominently in bright red letters, right on my chest. As all of this realization came to me in the second or two after the cashier pointed out my Costco ID card I was wearing, my face went a little pale and she asked me if I was okay. I mumbled something about feeling dumb and this being a habit from work as I paid for my stuff. I hurried out of the store, hoping I didn't see the woman who had been asking me questions. It began to dawn on me that if I weren't such a jerk coward, I'd go and find that woman, explain to her what happened, and apologize for being so rude. Instead, I just left the store in shame, feeling about 2 inches tall.
Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.